I haven't said anything and you're already clapping. I know I'm the last talk before drinks, so I'll try and be succinct. It actually reminds me of a true story of a minister who would get up to give his sermon every week, and his sermon would go 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 25 minutes, 30 minutes, and one week, one of his members came up to him and said, you know, that was an amazing speech. It so inspired me. But, you know, I'm an executive on a television show. It's a morning show. Would you be able to come in and just talk about what you spoke about this morning? And the minister's like, absolutely, sure, I'll come onto your television show. And the executive is like, but only one problem. You only have a 2-minute slot for this production. And the minister's like, yeah, I can cut it down to 2 minutes. And then she's like, can you do that every week also? You know, so given that, I'll try and be as succinct as possible as we talk about how a Git-based education cultivates more resilient developers. So, but first, a little bit about who I am. As mentioned, I am Ben. Hello, everyone. I'm the father to 2 amazing kids, most of the time amazing. And I am myself a second career developer who spent about 10 years in a field that's slightly different, not as a geologist, although that's awesome, but as a rabbi and a community organizer and an educator throughout the United States. And I'm from Southern California, lived in New York, and now live near Tel Aviv in Israel. And I work as a developer advocate at Nexmo. Who's heard of Nexmo? Anyone? A hand, yes, awesome. We are a cloud communications platform powered by Vonage. So musicians, journalists, lawyers, scientists, sometimes geologists, artists, cashiers, and yes, even rabbis. What do we all have in common? Well, what we all have in common is that we are all developers now. And why are we becoming developers? We're becoming developers because we love to learn. We love that this field is one that continually compels us to learn new technologies, learn new frameworks, learn new languages. If you're a JavaScript developer, maybe you're learning a new framework every other day. It's amazing. We love the challenge that's inherent in this domain of work, continually coming to work and approaching new business challenges with engineering solutions. We love the community, this wonderfully diverse, eclectic, warm, and welcoming community that surrounds software development. And yes, to be pragmatic, we also love the jobs. In this field, according to the United States Department of Labor, employment of software developers in the US is projected to grow 24% from 2016 to 2026, faster than all other occupations in the United States. So this is a field with so much potential out there to really actually transform lives, to take people to new opportunities, to take them and their families to new opportunities. And so as a result, people are entering into this field, and you might be one of them, or you work with them, coming from diverse places, from every walk of life, from every conceivable background, from every corner. You're finding people who are now software developers. And just as an example, for example, in 2017, so ancient time, but not so long ago, the average boot camp graduate, the average graduate of a coding boot camp, well, 11% of them majored in business in college, 8% in psychology or philosophy, 5% in communications or journalism, 6% in engineering, and only 5% had that computer science, that CS degree that was the classical trajectory into software engineering fields. And furthermore, they describe themselves as 34% complete beginners, 59% with some self-taught experience, and only 7% as an experienced programmer before entering a boot camp. So people are coming into this field with diverse skill sets, with a diverse education that doesn't always lend itself easily to the challenges that are inherent in this profession. And yet, if they're able to get through it successfully, if they're able to land that first vaunted job as a software developer, well, on average, they experience a 50% increase in their salary to roughly around a lot of variation here, but roughly around 70,000 US dollars is the average salary. There's people I know who are living on assistance, who are now taking care of their families with dignity in this career as a software developer. And yet, we also know that learning to code can be really difficult, and not just Java. Other languages, too, can be really, really challenging, especially if you come, like I did, from a liberal arts background. You are trained to think about problems in different ways. You have different methodologies, different approaches to tackling and creating solutions. And this field, this domain area of work requires, in some ways, different skill sets. Requires a different, it requires a paradigm shift, a different way of approaching challenges. So, is there a tool that can help future developers become resilient developers? Well, obviously the answer is no, so I'm going to leave the stage right now because we're done. But in actuality, it may not be a surprise that I think the answer is yes, and it may not even be more of a surprise that I think the answer is actually Git. That if you incorporate Git early on into developer education, it can have a transformative effect in creating resilient developers who can approach challenges. Oh, I just hit my mark on Fitbit. Yay. Resilient challenges, all this pacing, it's great. Resilient developers who can create resilient solutions to really challenging problems that arise on the job. So a little while ago, I sent out a survey to the wider community asking some basic questions around their experience with how Git was or not incorporated in their developer education, and I received responses from people who went through CS backgrounds in college, people who were bootcamp graduates, people who were self-taught developers from all around the world, actually majority from North America, but also from Europe and Africa and Asia, and I received some really interesting responses. Things like learning to use some form of version control is necessary to develop the confidence needed to build your code and collaborate with others. It gives better accountability. It's easier to roll back changes and work collaboratively. It helps me feel comfortable with change. Having version control and a good workflow is important to review my commits and find where I made the wrong move is valuable. And although I'm a novice, it seems to standardize the mechanism for sharing work, which I appreciate, and it makes the process more efficient. And lastly, it allows me to go back to see my iterations of my code over time, and it also saves my bleep when I break things. So, accountability, confidence, iteration, iterativeness, collaborate, and a good workflow. These are not just key catchphrases. I'm not just shouting DevOps, Kubernetes. These are actually amazing skill sets, which are sometimes come naturally. There's a little bit of a natural talent here, but also things that can be learned, can be acquired, can be developed, and I really believe are integral to what it means to take on Git as an essential part of one's developer education. So, an example. Because we obviously have to concretize this a little bit. So an example from the Flatiron School. Who's heard of the Flatiron School? Woo, Flatiron School, yes! So I feel like I'm in one of those hair growth commercials where it's like, not only am I the president, but I'm also a member. I'm not, by the way, this is all natural. But not only did I have the great privilege of being a coach at the Flatiron School for a little bit as in the online developer program, but I'm also a graduate of the Flatiron School. The Flatiron School is a coding bootcamp based in New York City, but now with branches throughout the world. One branch in London, so now for Americans that we can say it's throughout the world. And an amazing online developer program as well. And that's part of the community of WeWork. It was recently acquired by WeWork. And so the Flatiron School, from its very inception, incorporates Git really as an integral component of the educational experience of their pedagogical methodology. So, for example, the repository where the curriculum lives, the organization's called Learn-Code-Students. You can find it yourself. It's all open source. And it hosts around roughly around 74,000 repositories. That's every iteration of their curriculum throughout the years of the existence of the program. You can see the entire development. And they don't only use version control to track and to maintain their curriculum, they actually build it into the labs, into the exercises itself. So let's take a look at one. This is the Ruby Music Library. This comes relatively early on in the exercises that a student will go through in the curriculum. And at this point in the curriculum, where is that student? Well, they have started learning some of the basics of object-oriented programming in Ruby. They're starting to understand object inheritance, classes, and instantiating instances of classes. They've done some labs building up to this. And now this is their first time where they're going to be building a standalone program that does something, that not only has one class and one instance, but actually is going to ask the student to build 3 different models, a song, an artist, and a genre model, and that these models have relationships to each other, and they also have to build another model that's going to have a method that will extract file names and make instances of the song and the artist and the genre model, and on top of all of that, they also need to make sure that there's a CLI, that the user interacting with this can do something, and it not just lives out there in the ether, but a user can actually use it. So there is a lot into this lab. And just take a minute, take a step back, feel what it feels like as that student approaching this lab. It can often feel like this. I have absolutely no idea what I'm doing. You feel like you're a dog in a spacesuit in the middle of space and you just want to get your bone. And you just have no idea how that's going to happen because you have to build these classes, they have to relate to each other. There's methods that apply to all of them, so you should extract those and make them abstract so there's functionality across domains. You have to build a CLI. It's a lot of work. But thankfully, the way the curriculum is designed and developed intentionally so, is it's a combination of test-driven development and Git as the way to structure one's thinking. So the test-driven development, and here's the test for this lab, the test-driven development, what that does is it's telling the student, describing the behaviors of what this program is going to do. It's letting them know and understand the parameters, the expected outcomes for this exercise. And so when a student is looking at this, they say, okay, take a deep breath. I have 1, 2, and 3. I need to build my classes. I need a song class, an artist class, and a genre class. I've done that before in earlier labs. I know what that feels like. I can do it. Si se puede. Yes, I can do it. I can build my models. And then they're like, okay, now I need to start thinking about relationships. So what are the relationships? Well, there's a songs to artists, genres and songs, artists and genres. Okay, one step at a time. And so when you then take a further deep dive, well, what does it mean? What does it mean to build a song class? Well, it probably has an initialize method, right? Does this all sound a little familiar? Rubyist, woo, yay, Ruby. So an initialize method, and this initialize method will define the parameters for the instances of this class. What will each new baby song, what will it be given as it's birthed into the world on your computer? Well, it'll probably need a name, so it's got to accept a name, and the student's probably thinking, okay, I can do that also. It needs a setter and a getter. Got it. A setter and a getter. It takes the name, it gives back the name. Beautiful. You start breaking things down. And when you do that, what you're actually doing is you're using the test to describe the behavior. And as you're working through it, you're thinking in Git, which is breaking it down to its smallest component, one meaningful commit at a time. So does Git make you a better programmer? That was another question I asked. And I actually received some really fascinating responses on this topic. 81% of people said yes. Some other people said, well, actually, Subversion makes me a better programmer. I'm like, I don't know who you are, but that's amazing. You do you. And so how does it make them a better programmer? So take a look at some of these responses. Well, it gives me rhythm. It's integrated with our automated tests. And here we go again, right? Tests, version control, test, Git. There's like this relationship of synchronicity between the two. Synchronicity, that's a good word. I should remember that one. It gives me rhythm. It's integrated with automated tests with our management tool and fits perfectly in our processes. It forces you to structure your work. You can commit and push a whole week's work at once, but if you stick to some common rules, you commit small packages and you push once. And since I view Git as a way to track my progress, it helps me to think in blocks. So rhythm, thinking in blocks, structuring your work, thinking, well, where is my meaningful commit? When is the time? What is the time where I can say I've defined a valuable piece of work? And what is that piece of work? When does it end? What are the boundaries of that? These are incredibly valuable insights, especially for aspiring developers who are trying to learn how to think, how to structure their thought processes in this field, in this domain. So back to that music library. So when you have learning structured as a series of tests, like describe the initialize method, you begin to break things down to its smallest parts. You begin to understand that big problems are ultimately smaller problems that are actually encapsulating smaller problems, that as they build, they're solving the big problem. And Git becomes the tool that structures that thinking. So here's an example of one of the students completing this exercise, Anonymize. They're now Spider-Man. It's amazing. And so if you take a look at this example, you see the thought process that's happening in the moment as they're working their way through this, what is a complex lab. So starting code Wednesday morning, all green through 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. You feel the excitement. Are you feeling excitement? I'm feeling excitement. It's all green, yes. Forgot to create a new branch. It may be a little messy. 13 failures, 15 failures. Green really is a color. All green. And then finally done. Wow. That's amazing. I kind of want to celebrate with that person. Like, let's have a toast. That's the experience. There's a confidence building that's happening there. You're approaching an entirely new field. You don't really know if you can do it. And when you start thinking things through in a Git mindset, breaking it down in commit by commit by commit, what you're actually doing is building that iterative process where you're working and perfecting your code, making it better. You're developing the confidence that you can do it. You can really, really do it. And you're developing skill sets all at the same time. Because software development is ultimately about having two perspectives simultaneously, thinking big and thinking small at the same time, being up here at the balcony, understanding where you need to go, understanding what the end is, but also keeping in your head simultaneously how will the steps be structured that will get me there. So it's starting with that broad overview, understanding the world in which you're developing in. It's understanding the scope that actually defines the parameters of your program. So it's not just the world, but we're talking about Europe. It's getting the specs for that program, understanding what the boundaries of desired behavior are and what are the things I don't want to happen in my program. And realizing that all these things, ultimately, the parameters, the specs, everything will ultimately boil down to the Royal Palace of Brussels. That all of those things will lead to something beautiful and elegant that will really shine forth the monarchy of Belgium. And understanding how all of this comes together and seeing that, but also not being so awed by it that you don't forget that it all started with a single brick and other building blocks, but a single brick. That this is really built of these. And oftentimes, as a new developer, all you can see is that. All you see is the palace. And you know that's, by the way, just the office for the king. That's kind of crazy. But all you see is the palace. You don't understand and you don't appreciate that it's a bunch of these bricks, inelegant bricks, that built that. And that insight, that incredibly powerful insight, is what enables resiliency. So, another example, and this example comes from my current work now at Nexmo. So I'm the Ruby advocate. If you haven't noticed, I love Ruby. Yay, Ruby. Rinswan, Ruby is nice, so we are nice. Yay, hey, Mats. And so this example, so as the Ruby advocate, I also help manage the Nexmo developer platform, which is built on Ruby on Rails. Yay, Rails. And so one of the features we want to build is configurable landing pages. And what does that mean, a configurable landing page? Well, it means something like, if this works, something like this, where let's say you're coming to the Nexmo developer platform, which is where you find resources on our APIs, et cetera, and you are coming from a specific conference, from a certain meetup, a hackathon, an event, a lecture, what have you. You should be greeted. This is the big idea. You should be greeted as you, as who you are. That's our aim. We should know you right there. We should know who you are. And we should appreciate you. We should know what you like. And we should be able to give you the tools that are most helpful for you right when you come to visit. That's the big dream. So we want to have an event-specific welcome that tells you, hey, welcome from whatever conference. And if it's a language-specific conference, let's say .NET, we want to give you .NET tutorials and the .NET client library and .NET SDK and all other kind of fun .NET stuff. And let's say you're coming from a voice conference, well, we'll give you the voice API. We'll pick the products that make the most sense to show you. Some customization so you feel like you're getting to what you want to get to relatively quickly. But as anyone knows, a big dream conceived in the business side of things can often be very overwhelming to the engineering side. That what seems simple to those who are dreaming of it, who conceive it, is not always simple to implement, is not always simple to create. And what seems like a small thing can rapidly spiral into something that feels utterly, utterly overwhelming. So how do we get there? Well, we get there, as no surprise by now, by breaking it down. Breaking it down to its smallest and meaningful moments. So for example, this is a real live pull request from our Nexmo developer repo. So we want configurable landing pages. So the first step that we did was we built a data structure. We thought about the ways we would structure that data to be most efficient and most meaningful. We want to be able to give basically, let's say you're a community manager, and so we want to be able to say, community manager, go to this thing, drag and drop the event blocks, and we'll generate a website for you. Amazing, beautiful. So first we need to think about the data and how we structure the data. The next step after that is, well, that data needs to do something, right? It needs to do something. What does it need to do? It needs to render rows and columns. Do I care what's in the rows and columns in that moment? Absolutely not. All I care about at this moment in this iterative process is, can I take that data, can it get read, and can the right divs with the right class names be generated that will give me the right layout that is being called for? And so, this is me, raw, so every commit message there is not absolutely perfect, but I'm not embarrassed to admit that I'm not always a perfect committer, but it's me as I'm working through this process, accepting the default width, making sure that the type block gets rendered, all other kinds of stuff. But so to get there from when I first began as a student, this made me think, well, what was my actual first commit message? And I was hoping, I have to be honest with you all, I was hoping my first commit message as a new developer was something brilliant, totally inspiring, something that would be so profound. You'd be like, ooh, wow. My first well, this is basically that. You can skip that. But my first commit message, I didn't put in there. Well, whatever. My first commit message was one word which was done. I'd finished a project, and I just wrote done. Did I push it up as I was iterating? Did I think about the building blocks? Did I do all of this stuff that I made a nice little visual for? Absolutely not. All I did was write done. But from done to being able to think about problems that are easy to visualize from the business side, but complicated to build from the engineering side, well, that is a big process. So how do we ultimately put it all together? Well, as we mentioned, programming can be really challenging. For experienced programmers, for new developers, especially for people coming from non-traditional educational backgrounds in this field. And so, there it is. There's my first commit. Done. Beautiful. I put it in the wrong place. It's live, awesome. So going from that to something more profound, something that takes a little more complexity, can be a road that has a lot of turns, a lot of twists. It's not always a straight path. But ultimately, if you embrace the ways of the Octocat, and what do we mean by embracing the ways of the Octocat? By thinking big and small, by breaking it down, not getting down, but you can do that in a few minutes at the party, but breaking it down to its most meaningful commit, to thinking in hunks or chunks. I guess we heard earlier today hunks. Thinking in hunks or chunks of work, and really thinking about it as the most meaningful block of work possible, and making that one meaningful commit at a time. It can help aspiring developers become resilient developers. Thank you very much.